Thank you. I just wanted to ask Rav Melchior to say a little bit, as it were, in specifics about some of the things that have been happening that you think should happen.
Will you answer as sharply and briefly as was asked?
Well, it's like saying the whole of the wisdom standing on one leg. I think that we need to open ourselves, and I can't. What I can say, what I'm trying to do here in the Middle East. I'm not talking about meetings of leaders with funny hats and nice cloaks and photo opportunities. I'm talking about in-depth dialogues with the true people who have the influences in the communities, not with chief rabbis and, although I'm not talking about specific chief rabbis, there's some good and there's some bad, but I'm talking about the real people who have the influences in the communities, the Islamists, the religious influence, people have on the Jewish sides, they can be settler rabbis. I'm talking about people who have the influences, to bring them together to see, can we really feel, I'm talking about the Islamic Brotherhoods in Egypt, in Tunis, in Morocco, in Jordan, in Syria. Can we find the right language to bring us down from the totalitarian heavens with a dialectic language which is inside all our religions? Can we find that language which will make it possible for a different kind of peace, which will be a peace with the peoples, not with some dictators, which was the peace of the 80s and 90s, which I wasn't against. I remember the discussions with people like my good friend Yossi Beilin and so on, who said, let's make a quick fix peace and then we'll deal with all the in-depth issues. And I wanted to give it an attempt. I'm for it. I was for Oslo, I was for Annapolis, I was for Taba, I was for everything. But it didn't work. Why are we going down again and again the same blind alleys? I will be for going down. But it just, what is the result? Nobody believes in this anymore. And everybody's despairing. People are willing to do what's necessary for peace, but nobody believes in it. So we need a paradigm shift. And we need a real peace between the peoples. We'll have to do something serious for this. But I think that if people in Israel believed that we could have peace with Islam, wouldn't that be something great to come to the people of Israel? Wouldn't we then be willing to do something serious? Now, and it's possible, that's the good news. But we need to do something proactive for this. If the people in the Arab world are sure that Israel is here in order to wipe out Islam, we think that's ridiculous, but that's what the Arabs believe. Now, we need to do something proactive. We're just going down this line, which is bringing more and more hatred towards Jews and Judaism, more and more hatred towards Islam. We have Jews who support hatred against Islam, who support parties, racist parties. Could you believe that? We have Jews who sign declarations and rabbis who support. We have Poles in this country that you support, that you can't rent out apartments to Arabs, to Muslims, that you can't give jobs to Arabs. Would you believe that in the States of Israel? Is that what we've learned from Jewish history? And we need to fight this with all our power. And this is an active work, and we need to grow up, and we need to raise to the situation and fight this in our midst. Everyone needs, otherwise this is not a battle. This is not a battle of civilizations. This is a battle inside, which every civilization needs to take seriously. Otherwise we'll wipe out ourselves. Listen, and I'll say a last sentence here. It's not what Judaism is about. I think Professor Bental said, it's not what Judaism is about. It's not quoting what Judaism is about, what Islam is about, what Christianity is about. It's not interesting what Judaism is about. It's what we do with what it's about. That's what's interesting. It's what we are. It's what we do with it. It's not writing a paper about what Judaism is. It's not going to Rio and says, what is Judaism about? It's what we do with it. It's what we actively do today. And you know, in the book Kuzari, the king asks the Jew, it's very nice that you have all kinds of nice philosophies. What happens the day where you get political power? What are you going to do then? And he doesn't have he doesn't have an answer. This is our challenge today. I hope that we come well out of that challenge. It's in our hands, like in everybody else's hands, Christians. And what do you do with it? Not what a nice conference, and you say nice things about every religion is for peace, and then we go home and kill each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Both Professor Silk and Professor Siddiqui want to say something.
Just one quick word. I don't want to get in the way of the dialogues with the Muslims, but if you could spare a few moments during the intermissions to talk to our evangelical Christians about signing them up for it, I think it would be a good thing.
Thank you. I just on the back of what you were saying, I think that in some ways you were talking about the religious language that started the conflict, or it was at the beginning of the conflict, but it was a nationalist language that slowly gained momentum with religious language. And I think that that's what we have to be very careful about when we ask people to act and think and dialogue in the name of faith, that no language is as motive as religious language. So when certain aspects of nationalism aren't working, people resort to religious language to mobilize the masses, if I can put it like that. And I think, with all respect, I do think it matters. Absolutely, what the individual does matters. But I do think it matters when people say and are willing, just like you are, to commit themselves in public in highly vulnerable, fragile, contested spaces to a specific position. You may think you've been doing this all your life, but I'm sure there are people who are listening to you whom, when we hear you, it sounds like common sense, but a lot of people would be thinking, I never thought of it like that. So I don't think it is all about platitudes. It might sound like it after you've done it 20, 30 years, but the very reason why people are going towards more conservative, radical, fundamentalist, defensive positions in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are precisely because they haven't been tempted by the more humanistic, liberal, embracing outlook. And that, I think, is a real worrying. Why aren't they being lured into that?
Absolutely right. What we thought were platitudes, even 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 years ago, are not platitudes anymore, because there is a vacuum and the extremists are going into that vacuum. I hope in a month or 2 we will be up with, I hope, an immense website where all the central leaders of Judaism and Islam will be speaking on this website. I hope it will reach millions and millions of people in Arabic and Hebrew and English, saying things which I thought we didn't need to say, but all those things are not platitudes. You're absolutely right, are not platitudes anymore. The evangelists, some of them at least, beyond my, there are things which are beyond me. Other people have to, I've tried many, many, many times, as, they pick out what they want of my words and they print it again and again. It's a difficult case. And they're used, absolutely right, they're used here by the extremists. They condition their support for organizations and the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars they pump into the extreme right here on the hatred of Islam, and there are people here who build themselves on this hatred, and they love it here because they pay their way. By the way, don't think the same people here who take the money, they say, when we've finished with Islam, we're going to take on the evangelists afterwards. Just as the evangelists say, when we're finished with the Islam, we'll take on the Jews afterwards.
Let me say something from my own experience on a bit more optimistic tendency. I teach at Oxford in a new chair which was established 3 years ago, and I was the first professor to be appointed, and it's called the Professorship for the Study of the Abrahamic Religions. It was donated anonymously, but eventually I met the gentleman who gave the money, and he's a Saudi citizen from Jeddah. And when he was told by the University of Oxford that they had appointed an Israeli to be the first professor in his chair, he reacted, he said, well, what a wonderful idea. And when I met him for a tea party at my college in Oxford a few months later, at some point he asked me, and tell me, Professor, how do you intend to fight Islamophobia in Europe? I had not been prepared for this question, I must say, and I realized that the idea was to show the Christians, the Europeans, and of course for somebody from Jeddah, Oxford is the hub of the universe, to show that Muslims belong into the family. Muslims in Europe and elsewhere belong into the family, and the concept of the Abrahamic religions actually, which is a very new concept, didn't exist before the 1970s, is something created by European Christians, or I think some of them Lebanese Christians who were students of Massignon, to show that actually we belong, it's not only the Judeo-Christian tradition, but the Muslims are also part of the same tradition. They used a concept that comes from the Quran, actually can be found before, but comes from the Quran, sons of Abraham, the religion of Abraham, but in the Quran, it is of course in the singular. Abraham had only one religion, and we, the Jews, / the Christians / the Muslims, we are the only true inheritors of the religion of Abraham. Speaking in the plural puts them on the same level. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The idea is not new. The idea existed until the Enlightenment. Think of Nathan the Wise of Lessing. The three rings are undistinguishable. Only one may be the true ring, but you cannot see the difference. This was lost in the 19th century with the nationalist movements in Europe, with Romanticism, and with racism, which developed later on, and which put the Jews back together with the Muslims to a despicable Orient. This is starting to change. And Rabbi Melchior, may I suggest something? I'm very moved by your plea, and I certainly would countersign it completely. The fact that Christianity doesn't count so much here in the Middle East, I think is a very sad fact. The fact that Christian communities throughout the Middle East, from Iraq to Egypt, including the Palestinian territories and including Israel, are living, is a very sad fact. And I think that we should not, it would be better if we did not forget the Christians, and in a sense, they have, certainly in Europe and in North America, Christianity has succeeded to manage religion together with the public sphere where everybody, including non-believers in Christianity, are equal, even in officially Christian countries like the UK. And I think this is, the Jews too, in Europe, were able to participate to the Enlightenment and the Haskalah, but at the time they didn't have a country. And we in the Jewish country don't know how to integrate non-Jews.
Don't misunderstand. First of all, in all the processes which I participate in, the Christian communities are full participants. What I said was that the Christians at this stage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict are not the problem. That's what I said. They're not the problem. There's one place where the Christians are not the problem. That's all. Nothing else.
We still have some time for questions. Yes, could you come to the... Could you try to be sharp and precise?
I will only say that I work with interfaith dialogue for the last 30 years, and it is really the only way to get into peace. We visit mosque, we have mosque in our Muslim in our synagogue, and we all work together. And when somebody in speeches ask about politics, our Muslim friends say we will not speak about politics, we will not mix things up. Peace is peace religion. We are all brothers and we all believe in one God. What is my concern is that in religions nowadays all the extremists do appear. This is the problem now. Religion is the solution for peace. But when you have only radicals that appear, that will not go into dialogue.
Thank you very much.
Even Albert Einstein in 1929 said that the only solution to the Jewish-Arab problem is to leave out politicians and to get wise people on both sides to talk. Now, for many, many years, there are so many interfaith dialogues going on, Rabbi. The point is, how do we get all these people of goodwill, like yourself, to impact on the politicians? I was writing for a South African paper, and I gave your point of view now, and the person didn't want to publish the article because he said, all of this is going nowhere. It is only politicians that can make the decision. So my question to the panel is, how can these wise men actually impact on the political scene? Yes, a step of the internet is one way, but is there no other way they can impact and make the difference in real political terms?
Thank you. I think that since we have very little time, we'll take some more questions so that people can express their views, and we'll try to finish.
I just want to ask Michael Melchior, so trying to understand you. Are we talking about the new religion?
Can you...
Are we talking about a new religion? I mean, combining three different kind of...
No, I don't think anyone...
No, I just want to understand.
More questions?
Mine is similar to the previous question about the impact that religious leaders can have on politicians and social change. In America, I believe evangelical Christians have largely taken the wrong side of social issues. So not only how can they affect politicians and social change, but how can religious leaders specifically make sure that Judaism and Islam is on the right side of a progress towards peace and the right side of social change in Israel and Palestine?
Thank you very much. I'll take two more questions. Yes, first. Very briefly, please.
To what extent do you believe that the exclusivity exhibited, particularly in the extremism of all three major religions, will impede the mutual understanding of them?
Rabbi, you were asked to stand on one leg earlier. Can you stand on no legs? What would you, what can religious leaders offer on practical questions such as refugees, settlements, borders that politicians can't?
Thank you. I think that we should try to sum up. Jonathan, would you want to try?
Thank you. Well, by contrast with my paper, which was trying to give a few insights from anthropology into wider questions, I do fully agree with Rabbi Melchior about the need for practical action. You were skeptical about the caliber of some religious leadership. And by implication, when you talked about people in fancy clothes and photo ops, you weren't that impressed by some of the interfaith dialogue, which I personally think a lot of it is rather up in the clouds. I think one should start with very practical things, as I think you were suggesting. And if I could just mention something I'm involved with in myself, it is Islamic charities, because the humanitarian field is one where all the the religions have a great deal in common. And very sadly, in this part of the world, Islamic charities have come under a great cloud, in fact, in the world at large, for historical reasons. I'm involved with a Swiss government-sponsored project which is trying to help those Islamic charities that are bona fide and which face unjustified obstacles to show that they are acting in accordance with international norms of charity, such as non-discrimination, accountability, transparency, etc. And this, I think, it's just one small field, but it's a start, and it's a very practical start. And finally, Islamic Relief in the UK has become a very large and successful worldwide aid agency, working with CAFOD, that is the Catholic agency in many parts of the world, fully accepted by Oxfam and other major aid agencies as part of the community of major aid agencies. And this just shows what, with a sympathetic government and our charity commission, can be done. And humanitarianism is a field in which even secular people who honor the religious tradition, their religious traditions, can participate.
I got a lot of questions here. I would like to, we don't have that much time, but first of all, those who, I don't know what your editor thinks that the politicians here have done such a good job. What I've suggested hasn't been tried. So I'm not talking about some dialogue meeting here or there. I'm talking about a total different approach. Hasn't been tried. So I don't know what your editor has dismissed, because I don't know what you've written. But we haven't tried this yet. I'm talking about a total different religious approach. And if you think that religion up till now hasn't played a role, it has played a role. It's played a very negative role. But there have also been, if we talk about Israel, I just mentioned one of, the late Yitzhak Rabin said he would never have signed the Oslo Accords without the support of a religious leader like Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. And that was very important. And I can give you many other examples of that. I can also give you negative examples of things which are going on these days. Just look at the negotiations which are going on now about the 5 buildings in Bet El or something like that. These are with religious leaders. They're sitting with the rabbi in Bet El and negotiating how to move these 5 buildings or not. Don't tell me that religion isn't playing a major role this way and that way, and religious leaders on this side. Don't tell me that in the Tahrir Square, religion isn't playing a role. And it's not only the Muslim Brotherhood. People in the Western world are looking only at the religious party. When it was prayer time in Tahrir Square, everybody was praying. Maybe few not. But practically the whole, everybody was praying. We never understood Yasser Arafat and his religious connection. We never understood which circumstances he grew up in. We have never understood it in the Israeli leadership. We've never understood the impact of religion, not on this side or not on that side of the conflict. And I'm just concluding. And also when it comes to other issues, specific issues, before Barak went to Camp David, I was then a minister in his cabinet, and I went to him, I urged him that many of the issues which would come up at Camp David, he could go with an agreement, a religious agreement. He didn't want to. He said, religion will only mess up things which I will fix at Camp David. What did he do? He went to Camp David and took all the religious issues and messed them up. Not alone, right? Not alone. There were people who helped him to mess up at Camp David. But these are complex issues. I hope you will be able to write a good article for your newspaper, and we'll talk about that.
Just 2 very brief points. Thank you. The sociologist Max Weber once said that Islam doesn't have a sense of tragedy. That's what makes it distinct from Judaism and Christianity. And a leading 19th century missionary also said, Islam doesn't have a sense of sacrifice. And I think perhaps that's one of the things that we do need in our personal lives as well as our political lives, a commitment to some sacrifice. How we make that sacrifice is up to us. And the only other thing I would say about dialogue, it's a hugely contested term. But the only difference is that dialogue for most of us coming from peaceful societies like North America or Europe is a luxury. It's not a matter of life or death. But dialogue in conflict-ridden areas, and I would say that the Middle East is a conflict-ridden area, is a matter of life and death, or can be a matter of life and death. So perhaps the question isn't what is dialogue in itself achieving, but what would the society be like if there were simply no dialogue at all?
It'll be extremely short, but it does seem to me so much of the discussion at this conference has been about the Arab awakening. Rabbi Melchior talks about the Muslim Brothers in Egypt. I don't think religion it's going to be possible to take it off the table. And so the question is not whether it's on the table, but how it's on the table. We do have certainly plenty of evidence in this country and in the United States of interest group religious politics. The challenge is to create a different kind of religious politics, and that, I take it, is what you're suggesting, and I hope we can all support.
Thank you very much. We spent 3 minutes more than our time. We didn't solve the problem. Had we had 10 more minutes, we probably would have, but that's life. Thank you very much.